Hello and welcome back. This is the weekly schedule. If you're looking to maximize waiver ads this week for fantasy hockey, you've come to the right place. We have a lot to go over today, so let's jump right into the schedule for week 9. In week 9, things are different once again. So 12 teams play 4 times, 6 teams only play twice. If you have droppable guys on Anaheim, Carolina, Chicago, Nashville, New Jersey, or San Jose, those guys are droppable this week. And that is unfortunate for some of these guys. Logan Couture has been lighting it up. I mentioned him in last week's video, and since then, 2 goals, 2 assists, 7 shots, 8 hits, 4 blocks in 3 games. So he's still on fire, but now gets a light week. So potentially droppable if you're in a shallow league. Same with all those Devils ads I've been giving out and the Nashville guys that I featured on Instagram. So Matt Duchene getting it together lately, a 3-point game. Tanner Jeannot starting to hit a little bit more, closer to what he's used to doing. Even Ryan Johansson starting to come alive a bit, but all of those guys have a light week this week as well. Now, the schedule is not normal in the sense that the games are spaced out. So usually the light nights are Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. So you see these are the teams that play on those light nights this week. But Friday is pretty busy. As you can see, 10 games on Friday, only 5 on Thursday. That's a little bit backwards from what normally happens. And there's pretty much a lot of parity in terms of how many games per day. There's no 2-game days or whatever like we normally get. So because of that, I've highlighted a couple of the teams that play favorable matchup 4-game schedules on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sundays. And we'll start with Arizona. They're finishing up their 14-game road trip in Alberta. Those two are winnable games, to be honest. And there could be some goals in those if you have Markstrom struggling and he starts, and then if you have Campbell struggling and he starts against Arizona. Both of those guys have been pretty bad this year. Campbell's been awful. Then they have their first home game in over a month, but that's against the Bruins. So the only way they win this one is if the Bruins take them lightly. But another winnable game on Sunday at home against Philly. So that's something that we're going to come back to in the Sunday part of this video. Now, Boston, on the other hand, has a nice schedule, but it is pretty difficult with Vegas twice and Colorado once and 3 games on the road. Now, if anyone can handle this type of thing, it's a veteran team like them. But just a little bit of caution due to the strength of schedule. The same goes for Vegas. They have 4 games this week, but again, 2 of them are against Boston. So that's not going to be the easiest schedule. But in terms of strength of schedule, Colorado might have an advantage there. They play the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. Their toughest game is Wednesday at home against Boston, but the other matchups are a little bit easier. So Philly on Monday, then they're home against the middling Rangers on Friday, and then on the road in St. Louis on Sunday. And St. Louis is only as good as Jordan Binnington lately. If he's struggling, that could definitely be a goal fest. So that's something that you can mine some fantasy value out of. But one other schedule I wanted to mention, and that's LA. They face 3 awful defensive teams this week, though they are all on the road. So if you look at Ottawa, they're 19th in goals against in the league. Montreal is 22nd, and Columbus is 26th. So 3 of the 4 games are against pretty bad defensive teams. They all could be high-scoring affairs, especially with the goaltending trouble in Los Angeles, and we'll come back to that in the goalie portion of this video. Now, instead of doing what we usually do and taking a look at each of these teams separately, let's look at these best waiver ads all at once. So if you look at Arizona, their best ad, other than Chychrun, who's now up to 68% ownership, was in the low 40s before he came back from injury. So that was something that we were on here for a while. He's now getting owned up. But another guy you could potentially target is Lawson Crouse, only 9% owned, dual eligible left-right winger. 4 goals in his last 5 games, getting 2.5 hits per game on top of that. So between that, some shots, hits, he'll give you a decent floor. And normally he's a power play producer, but lately it's been 5-on-5. So maybe more power play production this week for Lawson Crouse. Now, another Coyotes ad for the power play, especially if you're in a deep league, Matias Maccelli, only 2% owned, 4-game point streak, 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points in his last 4 games, and you won't get many goals, shots, hits, or anything else from him. He is mainly an assist or power play producer, but he is producing, and their power play is 23.2%, which is 13th in the league. So a pretty good power play, all things considered, and access to either of these 2 guys who get some power play time could be the way to go in a 4-game week. But I've been saying it for most of the year. In terms of Boston ads, you should own David Krejci. Last week, I mentioned him in the weekly video, but it was a 2-game week. This week, it's a 4-gamer, and he's still only 23% owned. So he's riding a 7-game point streak with 10 points in his last 7 games, including 6 goals, 4 assists. Not a lot of shot volume, but excellent production nonetheless. He's playing top 6 on arguably the best team in the NHL, and he's riding shotgun with David Pastrnak. And yet, for whatever reason, he's only 23% owned. I don't really understand it, but that's a great option for this week, especially. And if you're in a face-off league, he also covers a lot of face-offs as well. Now, if you need hits and blocks, Connor Clifton, 28%, averaging 2.82 hits per game, 1.27 blocks per game, with some offense on top of that as well. And in deeper leagues, Derek Forbert, 2.64 hits per game, 1.73 blocks per game. Both are solid options. And one other thing I wanted to note from Boston, Swayman's ownership is now up to 70%. He's played 4 of the last 5 games, has 3 wins in that span, and he's put up some good save percentages, 9.44, 9.64. So he's played some good hockey. He's getting the bulk of the starts now. Ullmark was out. I'm not sure what his status is going forward, but they're likely going to want to limit his minutes as he was, taking a lot of the workload when Swayman was hurt. So now this is exactly what I was talking about with the perfect split between those two guys. Now would be the time to potentially try to get a trade offer for Swayman if you're an Ullmark owner. But in terms of Colorado ads, there's not a lot on the waiver wire. All those guys are usually owned up. Mentioned that a little bit last week when it comes to Lehkonen and Nichushkin, both of whom are great power play options, but they are, over 70% ownership. But JT Compher, only 4% owned, dual center right wing eligible. He had a 4-point game against Buffalo, 2 goals, 2 assists, 2 points on the power play. And in his last 7 games, 2 goals, 5 assists, 4 power play points. So the power play time is 1:50 per game. So that's a little bit surprising. If you're going to get access to anybody with this level of ownership who's playing on a Colorado power play, that's something that interests me, especially if I'm in a deeper league. So JT Compher is a potentially good option for that. Now, as for LA, just a quick shout out to Kevin Fiala, who's apparently already playing like second half Fiala. So 2 goals, 8 assists, 10 points, 3 on the power play, 20 shots in his last 6 games. So he's on fire right now. Some of you out there saw my Kevin Fiala video and said I'm going to draft him anyway, and he's been very good so far. So can't really comment on whether or not he's going to improve because he's already been very good. Now, this is an interesting case file that I wanted to come to, and that's Sean Durzi, 32% owned, 7 points in his last 5 games, a goal and 6 assists, 5 power play points. So he's averaging 235 power play time on ice this year. Doughty's at 307, so a little bit higher, but they are essentially splitting the power play quarterback duties. Now, Doughty has 16 points, a goal and 15 assists, 6 power play points, 43 shots, 33 blocks on the season. Durzi, by comparison, 16 points, so the exact same, 4 goals, 12 assists, 8 power play points, and the same amount of shots and blocks. Now, if you look at that and you're just seeing, the exact stats, and with, if you covered up the names, you wouldn't know that one of those guys, Doughty, is 95% owned and Durzi is only 32% owned. So you're essentially getting a carbon copy of Drew Doughty for a third of the price, so to speak. So this is definitely something that you want to keep your eye on if he's available in your league and you need a power play quarterback defenseman. Maybe if you're a Morgan Riley owner and he's sitting on your IR, this is a potentially good replacement option, especially with the production that he's had in the last 7 games with 5 power play points. Now, another guy getting it done on the power play in LA is Victor Arvidsson. Former shot volume guy, decided last night to start firing away and had 7 shots on the game, but 11 points in his last 11 games, 5 of those on the power play. 24% owned, and he's part of that Danault Moore Arvidsson line that I pretty much never shut up about on these videos. They're a great streaming option whenever you need it. They're all around 30% ownership, so they're all in that same boat. Danault's a face-off guy, so if you're in a face-off league, he's the guy to go for. Arvidsson used to be a complementary piece, but now he's starting to take center stage. And Trevor Moore is usually the shot volume guy that you can usually turn to for 3 to 5 shots per game. But that that line is all low 30s in terms of ownership percentage, so they should be there for you in most league sizes. And now just a quick reminder, there's 12 teams that play 4 times this week, so this list is not comprehensive. There are likely some other options you can go to if you need them. Just pick a dark green team over here on the interactive schedule, which you can access in the Patreon link in the description below, and then find what you need on the waiver wire from those teams, because there's a lot of teams that play four times this week. But we need to think a little bit differently this week, and these are ads that you can hold on to until about Christmas time. Now, some teams are playing a ton of hockey in the month of December. Winnipeg, Columbus, and Calgary all play 11 times from now until the Christmas break. So the best ads for Winnipeg, they play 11 games in 18 days between December 6th and December 23rd. And Blake Wheeler, if he's out there, go pick him up, but he's 57% owned, so he's likely not available for you. But Cole Perfetti is 26% owned, 3 position eligible. He's getting top line minutes right now with Scheifele and Wheeler. 7 points in his last 7 games, 18 shots, over 2 shots per game, and a power play point as well. So heading into Sunday's action, when I'm recording this video on Sunday, Perfetti is currently riding a 4-game point streak with 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points, 13 shots in those 4 games. So a lot to like going forward, especially if he's going to play this much in the month of December. Now for Columbus, not only do they have a 4-game week this week, but again, 11 games in the next 19 days. So I'm glad to have Patrik Laine back off the IR for this stretch. He had 2 goals on Friday night, and that really helped me out in my matchup, as we'll see later on in the video. Johnny Gaudreau's playing some great hockey lately, but he's obviously owned up. If you're in desperate need of goaltending, you could try Joonas Korpisalo, and we'll get back to that in the goalie ads portion of the video. But the other ad would be Kent Johnson, only 6% owned. In his last 6 games, 2 goals, 2 assists, 3 power play points. Season long, he's second on the team in power play points with 4, only 1 behind Johnny Gaudreau, which signals to me that he should probably stay on power play 1 despite Patrik Laine being back. If you have a guy who's putting up these kind of numbers on the power play, he's very skilled, very high draft pick. I would definitely look to keep him on PP1 if I'm coaching Columbus, but I'm obviously not, so we'll have to wait and see if he's still on the power play. But 6% owned, he should be a good option for the month of December. And then last but not least, the middling Calgary Flames play 4 games this week and 11 games in 19 days starting Monday. They have a bunch of options on the wire that you could try out. If you need a productive shots, hits, blocks defenseman, Nikita Zadorov, 1 goal, 1 assist, 1 power play point, 11 shots, 15 hits, and 12 blocks in the last 7 games. If you're looking for a forward ad, it seems that Ruzicka is back on the third line where he probably should be, but that may have actually boosted Blake Coleman's numbers. So Ruzicka is a center left wing dual eligible, only 3% owned, 5 points in his last 7 games, 3 goals, 2 assists, 2 power play points, 13 shots, so almost 2 shots per game. Blake Coleman on that same exact line, 6% owned, 4 points in his last 7, so 2 goals, 2 assists, 15 shots, 9 hits, and he's a dual eligible winger. And let's not forget Andrew Mangiapane. So the second line assignment right now with Kadri and Dubé, 3 points in his last 7, so nothing crazy there, but getting some shots and getting some hits, averaging almost 2 per game for both. And we're still waiting on him to break out. Same thing with Kadri. Kadri is number 1 on the team with 8.9 expected goals, but he's second worst on the team with almost 2 goals fewer than expected. And in the same vein, Mangiapane is 4th on the team in expected goals. He should have 5.8, but he's 3rd worst below expected at negative 1.8. So both are getting some chances. They're just not burying right now. I would look for them to increase their production a bit over this stretch, especially when they're playing this many times in the month of December. So all of these guys that you could potentially pick up, and there's others. If there's other guys on your waiver wire that aren't completely owned up, but they're from one of these teams, these guys play a lot in the month of December. So you could potentially pick them up now and hold on to them, especially if you have injuries on your team right now and you have some roster flexibility going forward. Now, for the Sunday schedule next week, there are 5 teams in the bottom 10 in the league in terms of goals against that play on Sunday. And you'll want to target players playing against these teams. You see these teams highlighted here on the schedule. And then the same teams are highlighted down here. This is team goals against as of December 4th. This is a little dashboard that I've made, and you can get access to all these kinds of dashboards in the Patreon link in the description below. But again, 5 of the bottom 10 teams in terms of goals against play on Sunday. So Colorado plays St. Louis, and the Blues are only as good as Binnington right now. So if he's in and they're giving up a ton of goals, but that's a potential place to mine value. But as I mentioned before, the only guy on the wire that might be available is JT Compher. Maybe you can try to pick up a new hook or somebody else that might be in the middle 6 of the roster. I also covered the Kings, Coyotes, and Blue Jackets a little bit already, but the Seattle Kraken are surprisingly 8th in the league in goals for, and the Panthers are surprisingly 11th worst in terms of goals against. So this sets up to be a high-scoring affair, especially if Bobrovsky plays, and that's something to monitor on Saturday night because the Panthers will be on the second night of a back-to-back on Sunday against the Kraken. So whichever goalie plays Saturday, the other one will get the Sunday start. And if it's Bobrovsky, it's going to be a goal fest. He's been horrendous this year. As I've been saying, he's not a goalie that I've ever wanted to own ever again since the beginning of the season, and you're starting to see why. But Kraken adds start with the man of the week, Matty Beniers, 10 points in his last 6 games, 5 goals, 5 assists, 2 power play points, 18 shots, so averaging 3 shots per game. And over the last 2 weeks, he's Yahoo rank 30 in category leagues. So a very solid option for the whole week, and he's 43% owned, so he's going to be there in some shallow leagues. Now, the Kraken play Montreal, who you also see on the goals against graph down at the bottom, and they play them on Tuesday, and then they're at Washington Friday, and then at Florida Sunday. So 2 of the 3 games could be higher scoring, and Beniers may be the better ad in 3 games than some waiver ads in 4 games, which is something to keep in mind. If he's this high above a point per game pace, and he's going to continue that into this week, that a 3-game Matty Beniers week might be better than a 4-game Victor Arvidsson week. So that's something that you have to kind of weigh for yourself, and just depending on positional flexibility, because he is a center, which is a little bit easier to find on the waiver wire. But for the Kraken, you also have Justin Schultz if you need a defenseman, 10 points in his last 8 games, 4 of those on the power play. He's 32% owned. You also have Jordan Eberle for deeper leagues, 7 points in his last 6 games, some good shot volume in that span. And in even deeper leagues, Jared McCann, dual center left wing eligible, 6 goals in his last 8 games, 8 points in that span, and 19 shots as well. And last but not least, I mentioned him last week, Daniel Sprong, 1% owned, 7 points in his last 7 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, 3 power play points, and 16 shots. So over 2 shots per game, and an excellent option for 16-team leagues and above. Now the Flyers are also playing Sunday, and if we haven't touched on some of these guys yet, but if Travis Konecny is on your waiver wire, he's a good add. 2 goals in 2 games since returning from injury, 21 points in 19 games this year, 9 goals, 12 assists, 8 of those on the power play, and 2 game winners. And then on top of all of that, 3.2 shots per game for Travis Konecny. But the only problem here is that people are now onto him, and he's 58% owned. So another good option is Provorov. He's a good hits and blocks D, but he's also 56% owned. So another guy who is producing almost as much or as much, but who's flying under the radar is Kevin Hayes, and I've been mentioning him in a number of videos, especially for power play and assists. He's 26% owned, 13 points in his last 12 games, 2.91 shots per game, something that I didn't expect to see. And he's on the top power play unit and the top line with Konecny and Noah Cates. The only problem with picking anyone up from this game, particularly Flyers Coyotes, is that they're both tied for the lowest goals for in the league with 59. So the play here might be actually picking up Vejmelka in this game because both Flyers goaltenders have been sub 900 goalies in the last 2 weeks, and Vejmelka is actually playing pretty well. So that could potentially be the ad for Sunday. But again, a lot of the things that you want to look for are teams that are playing bad defensive teams. And surprisingly, the Panthers are bad, Flyers are bad. These two teams are bad. That could be a goal fest, Columbus and LA. And then obviously St. Louis is struggling right now. And we'll come back to that right now as we get to the goalie ads. So week 9 goalie ads, and there are a few starters that you can now have with the injury to Thatcher Demko opening up a starter role for Spencer Martin, who's now 26% owned, a 2.56 goals against, and a 906 save percentage in the last 5 games. But in 10 starts this year, he has 7 wins. So his save percentage is low, but he's getting wins, and that's what you want if you're a Canuck fan, and that's what you want if you're in a points league that favors wins. He's going to get you wins going forward. So he's now the starter, and that's a trend that has also slipped into Columbus. Now, Columbus, we've talked about a couple of times. Merzlikins is the worst goalie in the league right now, but he will likely get a start in one of these back-to-back games, either against Pittsburgh or Buffalo. But the guy who is taking over the starter's role is Jonas Korpisalo. So 4 wins in 8 games this year. And in his last 3 starts, 1 win, a 2.05 goals against, and a 933 save percentage. And he is getting the start tonight against Detroit. So if you're watching this before 6 p.m. Eastern time and you want to scout him before you grab him, they play at 6 p.m. Eastern. So that's a potential, scouting opportunity. Take a look, see how he does against a pretty good offensive team in Detroit. If you like what you see, you could pick him up tonight before the waiver ads kick in, or you can pick him up early tomorrow, and he's likely going to be available for you at only 12% ownership. Now, Thomas Greiss will probably get one of the back-to-backs in New York. They play the Rangers and the Islanders back-to-back. The Rangers have been struggling. The Islanders have not, and it depends who's in net for the Islanders. If it's Sorokin, I would not think a win would be possible for St. Louis. Sorokin's playing out of his mind, but Thomas Greiss could potentially get 2 games this week because he's been the better goalie of the two in the last 2 weeks. In his last 3 starts, 3.08 goals against and a 921 save percentage with 2 wins. So something to keep an eye on. He's only 2% owned. He will probably get one of these starts and could potentially get another start this week if they're starting to lose faith in Binnington, which Craig Berube's comments about Binnington and his temper tantrums did not bode well for Binnington. Now, Philip Gustavsson, I gave him out in the last 2 weekly videos showing that Minnesota is a pretty good defensive team. They're 9th in the league in goals against right now, and that Gustafsson's been outplaying Fleury for the most part. So he'll likely get at least one of the back-to-back games on Friday or Saturday, depending on which one they want to start against Edmonton Oilers and Connor McDavid, but Gustavsson will probably play one of those games, and in his last 3 starts, 3 wins, 1.89 goals against, and a 932 save percentage. So 17% owned, he's probably there for you, and he's a good streaming option right now. And another good streaming option is Semyon Varlamov. He's 40% owned, and that's high for a backup goalie, but the Islanders are 7th in the league in goals against this year, and that's mainly because of Sorokin and Varlamov. Now they do play the powerhouse Devils on Friday, and then they have the goal-starved Canes on Saturday. So I would imagine Varlamov gets the start against the Canes, and they're 9th worst in the league with only 2.88 goals for per game. Now, if Varlamov does play the front end of that, it'd be kind of crazy in my opinion if Varlamov gets the Devils game. I would imagine they'll start Sorokin against St. Louis. Sorokin will get the Devils game, and then Varlamov against the Canes, and that's a favorable matchup that you potentially want access to. The only problem is he's 40% owned. So if you need somebody with a lot lower ownership and you're very desperate, and I mean very desperate, you could potentially try Phoenix Copley. So only 1% owned. As you'll remember, Cal Peterson got sent to the minors. Copley gets called up. And in his last couple of starts in the AHL, 1.66 goals against and a 941 save percentage. So he's gotten enough playing time in the minors, and he's played well enough to get the call up. I don't know if they'll call up Peterson later in the week to potentially take one of these 2 games, but they're going to have to play the backup on one of these back-to-back nights. I can't imagine Jonathan Quick playing both, as they're in Montreal and then they have to travel to Columbus. So Copley will probably get one of those starts unless they recall Peterson. If they do that, you probably don't want Peterson. He's been pretty bad this season. Now, we started this segment last week, going to keep it going this week, and this is goals above expected leaders. And you'll recognize a lot of them as the league's top scorers. And then, wait a minute, what is Jared McCann doing on this list? So McCann has 11 goals, 16 points in 21 games, and he's shooting at 24.4% right now, so it is a bit above a sustainable pace, so he may regress from that, but he's likely going to score 30 goals this year if he can put the puck in the net, anything like this for the remainder of the year. He's a dual center left wing, which is good for positional flexibility. He's on the 8th best offensive team in the league right now. He's getting some power play time, and only 14% ownership for Jared McCann. And that is a mistake. So if you're out there and you need someone this week, he only has 3 games, but 2 of them are against bottom 10 goals against teams, Montreal and Florida. And sometimes a 3-game week from someone this hot is more productive for your team than a 4-game week from somebody else. So that's why we're mentioning him here. You'll also notice Matty Beniers down here on this list, 4 goals above expected. This just shows that he's red hot. So this is basically, this stat right here is the equivalent of like the guy in NHL Hits 2003 just catching fire. And that's what's happened to Matty Beniers. We went over his stats earlier, 10 points in the last 6 games, 5 goals in the last 6 games. So he is above expected right now, but there may be some regression built in there, but he's a talented player. And that's a lot of what you see on this list are guys who are very talented, and the best goal scorers in the league can usually outproduce their expected goals, which is what you're seeing on this list. Now, you'll also notice Gabe Vilardi is still here, and he went ice cold for a couple of weeks, but now he has 3 goals, 1 assist in his last 5, 13 goals on the year. I wouldn't consider him a lock to stay on your roster longer term, but he is a good streaming option, still a dual eligible winger at that. And then last but not least, look at Nick Paul on this list, way at the bottom. 3.8 goals above expected, 11 goals on the year in 24 games, a 24.4% shooting percentage, so potentially due for regression there, but 7 goals, 3 assists in his last 10 games. He's a dual center left wing eligible, and he is 44% owned, so a lot of people have caught on to him. And a lot of that has to do with face-off leagues. So in my face-off league, he's 31 overall, has 157 face-off wins on the season to go with 45 shots, 47 hits, 21 blocks, and then 11 goals, 7 assists, 18 points. So he's getting a lot of stuff done for Tampa Bay, both on the score sheet and not on the score sheet. He's just taking a lot of middle 6 minutes and soaking them up and playing very well with that time, but potential regression candidate with that shooting percentage. But for right now, he's hot, so you could potentially ride that hot streak. Now, this is the list you want to use to get out in front of trends. This is how you spot when a player is going to start scoring and do so while they're still available on your waiver wire. And it can be a place to find buy low trade targets as well. And that's what I would categorize Alex DeBrincat right now. So DeBrincat, not bad, 19 points in 24 games, but only 6 goals, and he has 41 last year, so his pace is way off. He's expected to have 11 goals by this point based on the quality of his chances, but he's only got a 5.5% shooting percentage on unblocked shots, 7% shooting percentage overall, and the key factor is he's usually performing well above expected. So last year, he was 10 goals above expected. This year, he's 5 goals below. And his shooting percentage the last 2 years was 20.6 and 15.2%, not 7. So he should break out any day now and start scoring goals. On top of that, he's averaging 3.5 shots per game. So he's a shot volume guy even when he's not scoring. And that will give you a decent floor, but the goals have to start coming soon. And this is a team-wide thing that I'll cover in just a second, but I did want to say something quickly about Erik Haula. I mentioned him last week. He was number 1 on this list. He's still number 1 on this list, so it hasn't happened for him yet. And it probably won't happen for you if you own him this week because he's only playing twice. So after this week, he might be another target. 1.3% shooting, so really low there. Expected to have 7.6 goals. He's only got 1, so... definitely a guy who should start scoring, and he is playing with Jack Hughes, but again, a light week for him. Now, you'll notice this week I added in their expected goals because guys like Casey Cizikas, 3.4 expected goals. He doesn't have a goal on the year. That's not the same thing as Chris Kreider, who's expected to have 15 and only has 12. So not all of these guys are created equal. If you're looking at money puck data, which is where this comes from, you want to look at guys who have more expected goals because they're getting a ton of chances. A guy like Cizikas is not getting a ton of chances. A guy like Zach Hyman is getting a bunch of chances. Now Hyman has a bunch of goals on top of that as well. His shooting percentage is manageable, and he does have over a point per game average. So there's nothing wrong with Zach Hyman, but he could be scoring more goals than he is. And the same thing goes with DeBrincat. Now, another thing you may want to pay attention to, way at the bottom, Sam Bennett, expected to have 10.4. He's 3.4 below expected. And if you remember from last week, he was number 2 on this list. So he was way up here, and now he's starting to drop. And what I mentioned last week is you want to watch out for stuff like that happening and jump on the train as soon as you see it, because Sam Bennett is starting to break out, and he did so this past week. So he had 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points, 6 shots, 7 hits, and 3 blocks in his last 2 games. So is he starting to heat up? Well, this is what I look for. He was snake bitten. Now he's busted out with a 5-point effort in 2 games, and he'll likely keep this up in a 4-game week. Now, he is 68% owned, so this would be a shallow league play or a potential buy low trade opportunity. So this is something to keep an eye on with Bennett. I've been getting a lot of comments about him and Sam Reinhart. You'll notice Sam Reinhart not on this list anymore. He's started to score a little bit. But another guy I could see breaking out in the same fashion is Drake Batherson, who's way at the top of this list. Almost 5 goals below expected. 0 goals in his last 9 games, but 3.1 shots per game over that stretch. And his shooting percentage is unsustainably low. So this is, again, what I look for. This is spotting a trend before it happens. He's ice cold scoring goals right now, but it has to break soon. Unfortunately, he's 75% owned. So again, another low ball trade offer option. But if you have a guy like Gabe Vilardi or somebody similar that you picked up off waivers that was hot and maybe now has cooled off a little bit, you could sell high on them and try to target a guy like Drake Batherson, who gives you a good shot volume floor, and he's bound to break out goal scoring wise any day now. And Ottawa as a team has been snake bitten. They are number 1 in terms of goals below expected at minus 14.45. Nashville is 2nd, Carolina is 3rd, and that's something that I touched on in the recent How to Use Data for Fantasy Hockey video. And in that video, I went over team level data and teams like these that are about to start breaking out and start scoring, and you want to target players on those teams before they break out. Their ownership will be a lot lower. You can ride the trend instead of trying to catch the trend once it's already happened. And now the Sens have their number 1 defenseman back. Thomas Chabot was out for a while, so that may factor into it. Jake Sanderson's still playing well, so now they may be able to actually get the puck to their skilled forwards and start to break out of this funk. But again, that's what I look for. Some of these guys, DeBrincat, Batherson, could be trade options. Sam Bennett could be a trade option. Chris Kreider is still playing pretty well, despite the fact that he's below expected, but he used to be number 1 on this list. So that's another type of thing where you can spot a guy at the top, and when he starts to drop, then you start to pick him up. And that could potentially work out well for your fantasy team. Now, this week in my main money league, the THHL, I absolutely embarrassed former league heavyweight, but now in rebuilding mode, Atletico Wolfish. There is a good excuse, as you can see from our manager trends. He's now a father of 3 as of 2020. So it's getting a lot more difficult to pay attention to fantasy. He's now going from man-to-man to zone defense. I know from experience I've got enough on my plate with 2 kids, so I can only imagine how little time he has for fantasy. But as you can see, I started implementing the data draft strategy in 2018 and started to climb in the opposite direction as him, and this is kind of what's been happening lately. This win, should it hold at 9-0 or even 8-1, should put me in 2nd place at the very least. Could put me in 1st depending on AC Delaware River, who's currently up 7-3. Now, across my leagues this year, 7-0 in my face-off league, but a tight matchup that I may or may not edge out this week to keep the unbeaten streak alive. I'm about to be 5-3 in another league. I'm projected to lose in the data draft league to send me to 5-3 after an unbeaten 5-0 start, so a little troubling there. But I'm about to go potentially 23-8 across 4 leagues, all different point weighting, different category of point leagues. So just showing you that you can have a lot of success with the data draft strategy and staying up to date by watching these videos. I put a lot of work into them to try to help your fantasy teams, and hopefully I've been able to help your teams as well. And if I have, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you and see how your season's going. But that's going to do it for today's video. Thanks a lot if you watched until the end. Make sure to like and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram at data_draft. I usually put out some quicker updates on there and some Sunday plays, which I did today. 3 Sunday plays for the matchups that are going on right now. But again, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.